So, welcome to another CMC podcast. Today, we're continuing in our series of Meet the Instructor, and joining us today, we have Craig McClure. Craig, welcome.
Thanks, Doug. It's finally here. It's been a while, but we're making it happen.
Yeah, exactly. So, we'll kind of jump right into it here. So, what got you involved in the emergency services?
Wow, you do no small talk to open these things, do you? You just go right at the meat, huh? Well, I got started. I came out of college and moved to the Portland area. And my sister she was a DA, and she was a volunteer dog handler with the SAR group. So not knowing anyone, I got involved with that. I ran both wilderness air scent and cadaver dogs for about 10 years. And then when we moved to Bend years and years ago, I hooked up with the SAR team there, and the people that I just kind of liked and had fun with were the rope people. They're the ones that went out and had fun and played, and kind of got hooked with them as the fun part of SAR. And I don't know how much you've done in the volunteer world. I guess you do now, right? You're retired out and volunteering, and
Well, yeah, kind of. Yeah, I started in the volunteer fire service and actually ended my career in the volunteers.
Yeah. So when you're volunteering, you've got to find your drive and your motivation other than actually performing the mission, because it happens so rarely. And what I found are the people that were kind of high drive and stayed involved and were doing things were the mountain rescue and the rope people. So I gravitated to them, and in order to play with them, I had to learn my stuff, and I had to learn it quickly. So spent a bunch of years there and learned some good lessons, had some good mentors, and I guess that kicked it off. That's what started the addiction.
So you got a really good start on the rope stuff up in Bend. So what happened after that in your career, and then also like your full-time careers?
Oh, full-time careers. Oh, I had to make a living while I was doing volunteer rope stuff. Shocking. So my full-time career has been all over the map. I came out of college with a really, really useful studio art degree, and lacking any paying jobs in that field. I started when I went to Portland. I started flipping houses and worked as a general contractor. And while I was doing that, I ended up with a contracting job building a mobile command post for Tillamook County out on the coast. And that took me into the public safety radio world. And I spent a bunch of years working for a systems integrator out of Portland, building dispatch centers, helping write software, doing tower installs, doing integrations. When I was there, we built the first public safety radio network leveraging the public internet. So we built a radio system for one of the largest air ambulance systems in the country. It was like 14 states, 120 towers. It was a beast. So I got involved in that. And at the same time, I was doing more SAR stuff, and I started volunteering and teaching at conferences and picking up teaching gigs doing that. And I think a lot of people will know this sentiment when they hear it. My wife said, "You better get paid or you better stop doing it." It was too much time. So I started a little training company called the Crackerjack Group, and I ran that for 10 or so years. At the same time, I was pursuing a career in law enforcement, and I moved over to that for a while. Simultaneously, the Crackerjack Group became a non-transport EMS agency in the state of Oregon. So we're doing concerts, races, festivals, standby medical, film safety work, all sorts of weird stuff. And it's just all kind of blended and progressed. And years ago, the law enforcement career and I parted ways. It wasn't a healthy lifestyle for me. It wasn't a good way to be a parent and a father and be present. And it just wasn't a fit. So I went back to the rope world. In fact, I was leaving that, and I actually sent a message to a good friend in the rope training world and said, "What do I do?" And his response was, "Dude, rope is where it's at." And with that kind of community around me, I came back to the rope training world, and I don't think I'm going to look back. I think I'm here.
A very eclectic background, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yep.
And I know Matt Sharper is happy he's not the lone gun toter in the group of CMC instructors now. So have you been on any and you kind of talked a little bit about the specialty teams? You know, you mentioned the dog and everything, the dog units. Anything else from a specialty standpoint you've been involved with?
I think the most specialized was our mountain rescue team in Bend. We were part of a larger SAR unit, but we were a subunit, and it is a great place to be. We had Smith Rock all summer and through the winter, and then we had the Three Sisters Wilderness and all the glaciated peaks. So we were kind of a 4-season, 365-day-a-year unit. And the other cool thing I got to do with that, just because of affiliations there, I ended up for a couple of years playing with a group called the Glacial Cave Explorers. And through the leader on that team, we ended up in some pretty sketchy places, but had a blast. We were the first group that I know of that were permitted, other than the monument scientists, to camp inside the crater of Mount St. Helens and spent time. And we helped a pretty crazy scientist get underground underneath these glacial caves down in the hot rock underneath the ice to map the caves and place gas monitors and temperature and humidity monitors in what they believe is an attempt to be able to predict the next eruption, which is pretty cool work.
An interesting combination.
Yeah. So a little bit of confined space, a little bit of gas, a little bit of rope, a little bit of alpinism, and a little bit of sketchy helicopter flying.
Sounds like a heck of a party there.
It was a great party. Yeah.
So this is kind of interesting because now you're now not the newest employee with CMC, but why don't you talk about now when you started for CMC?
I'm not, and I'd like to tip my hat to Jason Ilowite for jumping on board and making me not the newest guy anymore. Thanks, Jason. You're a cool dude, and even better in my book now because I'm one rung up the seniority ladder from where I was a few weeks ago. So I had the Crackerjack Group, and I merged that with some partners in Canada at Ronin Rescue. We formed Ronin USA, and I guess about a year ago, I left that company, and I think they've still continued on. And when I left, the invitation to CMC came pretty quickly, which is fantastic. This is a small community, and it's a community of friends and respected colleagues. And if you treat the industry well, the industry treats you well. And I got the opportunity I didn't think would come till I was far, far later in life. I still have some hair and it's not all gray, so I thought there's no chance I'm going to get to work at CMC for a long time. But I came on board in, I guess, March or April of last year, and was immediately within weeks put on a plane to, where was I? Cedar Rapids or Iowa City somewhere, and it was off to the races from there.
Yeah, that kind of interesting. Yeah, because I know you hit the ground running working in your task book there, so that was great.
Yeah, there wasn't a shortage of opportunity to get to work. I didn't realize when I started that when you look at the CMC calendar online, that is a sliver of a view on the amount of work that's happening.
Yeah, that is for sure. Yeah, the vast, a good majority of our work is as you know, the contract work, the contract classes. So.
Yep. Yeah, and I actually think the contract classes can be some of the really fun ones. You get to go in and rather than teach to a specific curriculum and get people to move through a set of JPRs, instead you get to go in and meet with them and say, what's your problem? How do we get to solve it? And I think there's a little bit more creativity and a little bit more freedom to find solutions and not be so prescriptive in the contract classes.
Yeah, and I think one of the kind of the interesting things is not only do we help them find solutions to their problems and teach them those solutions, we've also in process pre-planned a lot of their spaces when it comes to confined space or rope. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a perfect lead-in into what subjects do you teach for us?
So I don't teach trench and I don't teach confined space. I think we'll go that way. One is I don't teach trench because holy cow, is that specialized? And unless you've done it for a career, I think you're crazy to try to teach people how to do it. I think that someday I'll get to confined space. I've done some confined space work. I'm not an instructor, but I think I'll just take my time and kind of build some experience in that. But I teach the rope 1-2, our rope 3 class. I teach the vortex class, and then we just launched REMS and remote rescue program.
Yeah, so why don't you talk a little bit more about that? Because that's a really interesting program.
Yeah, that's been on my mind for a couple of years. The REMS program came out of really the West Coast and California Fire Service as a deployment module to get injured or endangered firefighters quickly out of danger with a resource that was ready and trained on the fire line. There just isn't time to call in outside resources to get it done. And because of the explosive growth in West Coast wildfire, the demand for those teams kind of outpaced the training and the standards that were being developed. And looking around and hearing the stories and talking to people, it just didn't seem like they were getting the right training from the environment. They were being told, hey, take the rope knowledge you know, take the equipment you know, and go apply it to this very, very different environment. And we had the opportunity here to kind of look at it from a different lens and say, what experiences and what knowledge and what techniques can we bring forward? And the rewrite of the fire scope document this year gave us the option to start to look at less traditional rescue methods, lighter weight gear, things that were more appropriate for that environment. And if you talk about REMS, it's got to be what can 4 or 5 people carry along with all their fire gear to solve a rope rescue problem. It's a lot of fun.
Well, and I think one of the things that I was most impressed about, we've always told people that the CMC class is not a 40-hour advertisement or a commercial, and we use multiple people's gears.
Well, none of us look good on film
Exactly.
anyway. We can't, right?
Yeah, we all have faces for radio. But I think when you look at the equipment list and you look in the stuff there is literally equipment from manufacturers from around the world and equipment from around the world that you're using in that class.
We have to. I've been in this industry long enough to be able to say and know that no manufacturer has the complete catalog to solve all the problems. It just doesn't exist. And different manufacturers have found wins in different places and own different segments of the market. But when you look at REMS, we have to bring a lot of those different markets together, right? We're dealing with roadside rescue for a tender that's rolled off the edge, working off of a big red truck. And that's one set of solutions and one set of gear. And then we're telling 3 guys to carry 600 feet of rope and the hardware and the anchorage to go solve a problem of a guy stuck in a canyon. And no one spans that scope. So we pull gear from the traditional rescue market. We've stolen concepts from ARB rescue, especially some of the anchoring techniques. We've taken stuff from mountaineering. We've taken stuff from vertical rock rescue. We've taken all the disciplines that kind of fit together. And I think that's what makes it exciting for me. And I think it's really where rescue's headed. I think you and I could have a whole nother podcast about how, traditional fire rescue, ARB rescue, mountain rescue,
rope access,
caving, rope access are all colliding at pretty high speed right now to create some new ideas. And then you mix in the ability for rapid prototyping and faster engineering and faster equipment to market cycles. It's changing very, very fast. Mm-hmm. And we joke about it. If you write a book about it, the book's out of date by the time you get it to print.
Literally, yes.
That's how fast things are moving. Mm-hmm. And REMS gave us the ability to kind of jump on the front of that wave. And our hope is that we can continue to evolve as that moves forward.
Yeah. And I think, just seeing, some of the outlines and seeing some of the gear and stuff you're using in that class, I was really impressed with it. And it definitely is going to break a lot of stereotypes, of a lot of training, as far as manufacturer-based training, because it has very few of our products and has a lot of everyone else's.
Yeah, it has some of ours, right? And you're right. It just, not everyone fit, but there's There's a great picture that'll get out on our social media soon, I'm sure, which is a tarp with about 30 pounds and 20 pieces of gear, including the rope. And it was everything these students did to accomplish a 300-foot lower raise with a litter.
Wow.
To evacuate a patient. And what normally would have been, 4 or 5 gear bags and 6 or 8 rope would have been overkill. They were able to distill down to just very simple, well-run, lightweight components. And that's where that education has to go.
Oh, very interesting. So what do you enjoy most about teaching?
Interesting. So I think just from history, I think the impression is that we all enjoy the big, fancy, whiz-bang, rope voodoo, secret squirrel stuff, right? All the cutting edge, super fancy new things, and that's fun. But I think in the end, what it boils down to is probably, day 3 of rope 1 rappel day. Is that day 3? Now, one, I don't sleep that night because it scares me. They're putting all these new people on rope. But I think that's the simplest joy in all of this, which is you take people and you expand their world. You get people in those classes who are deathly afraid to be at the top of an 8-foot ladder. And you convince them to step over the edge on a piece of textile and weight a system and trust it to hold them before they get to the ground. And I really enjoy what we do in this, which is help people overcome those fears and kind of open up new things in their life. I think for some people it's rare, but I think for some people it's a life-changing moment. And for a lot, it's a career-changing moment. So I think I like giving people new things. I like helping people overcome challenges. And the other thing I really enjoy is helping teams get better as a team. There's so much we do that is about the gear and the widgets and how we click things together. But it really comes down to how does a group of people come together to overcome a problem in a high stress environment under high consequence. And I really enjoy kind of the psychology and the teamwork part of that, seeing if we can make people just work better together.
Yeah, you're right. And it's interesting, too, because that has so many different dynamics in the contract versus open enrollment classes. So the contract, it's usually a group of people used to working together. And then the open enrollment is of people from all different walks of life, potentially from all over the country, possibly the world, all coming together and working together as a team by the end of the week.
Yeah, you have to approach it with different objectives, right? With a contract class where they all come from the same team, you have a different carrot and a different stick to work with, right? They all know each other. Sometimes that's the downside, is they all know each other, and they bring a lot of baggage with them and a lot of interesting personal dynamics. And sometimes you're part social worker and part instructor to help them navigate through that stuff. And in the open enrollment classes, I think it's more about helping establish maybe a common language and helping people articulate their vision and their goals to a group to get to a solution. But it's still about communication and personal dynamics.
Oh, very well said. So when you're not teaching or at work, what do you do how do you spend your time, or what do you enjoy doing?
I noticed you didn't use the word extra time.
Yeah, no, no. I don't think any of us have anything such as that, but yeah.
Look, I do this because I love what I do, and frankly, I have to do something, right? But I do this because I've got a 6 and a 9-year-old at home and a family, and we have dreams and goals as a family. And so when I'm home, it's tough. We're gone a lot. So when I'm home, I really try to be present and be home. And I think there's another whole podcast on that topic alone. Like, for all the instructors out there, how do you be a good spouse, parent, family member, all of that when you're gone so much? But we have a little tiny farm, and we raise ridiculously entertaining ducks, and we have a little Airbnb in our property, and we enjoy the hospitality part of that. And being a farm, there's always, I go home and there are more things to fix than I have parts for and time to take care of. And other than that, love getting out fishing in the high country. I've got a 9-year-old daughter now who's learning to read water and is mad if I go fishing without her. So I feel like maybe there's a parenting win in that. And we try to get out and enjoy where we live as much as we can. And I play the banjo really, really, really poorly. But that's about what I do.
So I think we can get you and a couple of our other guys together. So you got a banjo, we got drums, and we got a singer.
Who's
in the
the
group.
drummer?
So it could be an interesting band there. Yeah, have an interesting sound with banjo, drums, and vocals. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds horrific. Yeah. Perfect. I want to know who's the drummer.
Kelly.
Kelly's the drummer. Who sings?
Leroy.
Oh, Leroy can sing. That's right.
Oh yeah, man, can that guy sing?
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I don't know what we'd call that band, but maybe there's a, if there's a comment section here, guys. Try to name the band. What do you name a band of a DC drummer, a Wisconsin singer, and a Colorado bad banjo player? Like, what do we call that band?
I think probably pretty limited in its audiences. Maybe ITRS would probably be about the one of the few spots. ITRS and maybe the Texas Rescue Competition.
I mean, we could use it at ITRS to clear the hospitality suite at the end of the night. That would get it done. I think that's really our only purpose. Yeah. Yep.
So, actually, speaking of ITRS, you've presented her multiple times, including 2 presentations this year.
Yeah, it's a fun event. I look forward to it every year. And not really, I don't think a lot of people go for the networking. I don't see it as networking anymore. I see it as, done right, ITRS is a giant collaboration. And a lot of good ideas come from people talking about really bad ideas. And they get distilled out, and you have the friends and colleagues you trust to bounce ideas off of, and good things come from it. And I think that's really what ITRS is. I would, you talk to the old people, I won't name names at all, and they talk about ITRS used to be contentious and people got in fights. And I don't want to see it get back to that. But I'd really love to see ITRS become, maybe swing the pendulum back a little bit more to where people aren't afraid to get up and be controversial. As long as they're not offensive, but get up and try new ideas and throw things in the wall and see what your colleagues think and see how the industry reacts. That's how we evolve. So yeah, there's a lot of great research that comes out of ITRS. There's a lot of education. You just sit in the room. There's so many brilliant minds and so many experiences to learn from. But to me, the magic is really in the challenges and the conversations and the ideas and really the challenging of old ideas.
And that's, I think, has always been kind of one of the steady foundations, if you will, of ITRS is looking at what we do and asking ourselves, should we be doing it? Is this the right thing? Kind of challenging the existing concepts and ideas. And I think the group this year especially was probably the most diverse group I've ever seen as far as SAR, fire, industrial rescue, cavers. Been a huge increase in the caver and the caving community, cave rescue representation at ITRS. And I think that's been a real healthy thing.
I've made a career of picking on cavers, right? It's just so easy to do. But at the same time, we have to recognize the amount of innovation and the amount of equipment and techniques we use that were born from caving. And that caving influence in ITRS is vital to the growth and also vital to the history, right? When you talk about, birth of brake racks, right? Caving,
Yeah.
right? A lot of our anchoring techniques, caving, ascending rope, movement on rope. I don't think Spratt would be where it was without the influence and the techniques that came out of caving. So I guess it's my apology to cavers. I've spent 15 years picking on all of you, but there's your tip. There's the tip of the hat to you.
And I will say they did add an interesting dynamic to this year's hospitality suite with a caving obstacle/confidence course within the furniture in the hospitality suite. So that was entertaining.
Yeah,
everyone. So.
It did make me happy that it wasn't my credit card in the incidentals for that room. ITRS is a blast every time, and I think there's good energy behind it. I think maybe it went through a little bit of a lull. I think COVID hurt a little bit. But I'm already getting emails now of people who have ideas and they want input. Like, hey, I want to present this next year. I want to do this next year. And it's not all about pulling ropes and seeing where things break. Most of what I'm seeing is human factor stuff, and that's exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the two that you did this year, I think were very interesting.
We want to generate discussion around our use of engineering terms and concepts and misapplication of those. And I think the negative we got on that was we didn't have the answers. And you're right, we didn't have the answers. But we wanted to point out some things that we thought were being misapplied, such as references to civil engineering standards, references to aircraft standards, how we use the term safety factor. But our goal was met in the end. We wanted to create discussion, and I know those discussions happened. And the second one was just super practical in nature, right? We had a group of people that wanted to get together and see what we can make happen with 8mm rope. And we learned a lot. We learned a lot about how the tests work. We learned that maybe 8mm is still a little bit too small for the devices and the equipment we have. And I think importantly, we found some practices people are using that might be suspect. And that's also generated good discussion, and I think is going to change a few minds on some things people are doing. And to tip our hand, I think our plan now is to take that same methodology, the same test setup, and recreate all of that on a much grander scale at 9.5. Because I think as a group we looked at it and said, we think this is where these systems are going to function well and still be lightweight. And we want to do it at 9.5 and do enough that we don't have to say this is backyard testing. Our goal is to do enough that we have a definitive work that stands on its own and the data speaks for itself, and then people can make decisions on what they want to do from that.
I think that'll really be interesting.
Yep.
Kind of maybe that might be the Goldilocks of rope, if you will.
I think there's a lot of beauty in 9.5. It's big enough that it feels good in the hand, and that is, my friend Jonathan says, that man-machine interface feels pretty good. There are a handful of devices that are designed to work at that diameter. We're not having to cobble things together. It's got enough mass that resilience of the rope shouldn't be as frightening as it is at 8mm. And it's still a big savings when you drop from 11 to 9.5.
Mm-hmm.
And we're using 9.5 in the REMS class.
Yeah. I think that'd be very interesting to see what the research, how that comes out. So, and this is a dangerous question to ask you of all people.
Oh, geez.
Anything in tech rescue that you have strong feelings about?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. So we're going to
be a podcast in itself.
We'll start with a fun one. The term, and when people come into class or they learn a new thing and say, that's just another thing in the toolbox, it drives me crazy. Not as crazy as people saying hot water heater, but almost as much.
So a tip to all students, if you really want to get Craig going in a class, that's the term to use.
Yeah, tool in a toolbox. And I think there's some instructors that there's a little side bet going on when the term first gets used in a class. One of the things we struggle with in Tech Rescue is retention and competence. And every new technique requires more time to learn, to relearn, and to maintain competence on. So this theory that we're just going to shove more techniques and more ideas into this giant toolbox and carry around and be able to pull them out at will and cobble them together, for me, doesn't fly. I think if you're gonna pick up a new technique, you need to consider what you're going to stop learning if you're going to learn a new one. Mm-hmm. And I think it's who is it? Arne Larson had a saying. I think it was knowledge in the backpack weighs nothing, something like that, right? Like knowledge is your greatest tool, and it doesn't have volume, it doesn't have weight. And when we add tools to the toolbox, we're throwing weight in that backpack, and we're making it harder to operate. We're making it harder to maintain competence on the things we need to be competent on. Mm-hmm. So there's one, tools in the toolbox. Oh boy. The phrase, "but did you die?" I know it's funny. I know it's sometimes tongue in cheek, but I think it's creeping us down a road we don't want to go down. That our baseline of success can't be measured on whether or not there was a negative outcome. We operate and we train in an environment with almost no negative outcome. Right? It's really hard to run human trials and drop things because it seems to be unacceptable to drop human beings. So we don't train with negative events. And then we go out and we do something and say, hey, there was no negative event. It must have been success. And that's dangerous. I would love to find a way to do more training based on negative event feedback. When things go wrong, allowing things to go wrong, but it's frequently unsafe to do so in the real world. So how do we do that without getting people hurt? But just saying, hey, we did it and nobody got hurt, it must have been okay, right? I could drive a Ferrari down the highway at 160 miles an hour over and over and over and maybe not have an accident. It didn't make it safe any one of those times. I know and I'm sure there's a better example out there, and I don't own a Ferrari, so it seems like a safe bet that I won't wreck it. Yeah, so I guess
the mighty Ford.
What?
The mighty Ford won't get up to 160.
I mean, the mighty Ford at 72 miles an hour vibrating isn't really all that dangerous, you know. It just is what it is. Yeah, so I think I guess when you ask for like what are my peeves and my issues, they're about how we think about rescue, maybe not how we execute rescue.
Yeah, very interesting. I think you just hit another topic of a podcast.
There we go.
So we've kind of talked a little bit about this, but what do you see in the future for technical rescue, rope rescue?
Robots, lots of robots. I mean, no joke. I think the unmanned vehicle aspect is going to grow. There's already work being done to eliminate the need to put people on rope by using unmanned drone, whatever you want to call them, vehicles. The ability to get situational awareness, to bring people gear, to set anchors. I do think that's coming. As obnoxious as they are when you're in the wilderness, I think they're a fantastic tool. The future, boy. I don't know. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in all these different manufacturers' engineering conversations about what's coming. I think the way that engineering cycles are speeding up and the amount of new gear we're seeing hit the market that is really quality functional gear, I'm not sure we can predict what the change is, but there's going to be change. There's always going to be a push to lighter and smaller. And while I've been on that train pushing pretty hard, it's not always appropriate, and I think we should be careful with it. Right? People come to us and say, "Well, we want to work on 8mm because Special Forces does." Well, great. You're an urban SAR team that drives to the incident, and they're a team that hikes in for days or gets inserted on a helicopter and needs to evacuate quickly, or they get killed by the people they're trying to hunt. Their risk profile is different than yours, so maybe don't adopt their practices. But that's not the entire drive to go lighter and faster. Generally, rescue is a time-compressed environment, so the ability to solve the solution quicker is a benefit. I'm not sure if that's going to go towards really lightweight, skinny rope, or if it's going to go towards doing more with one rope. And curious to see where that lands. And the other one is we're saying rope. I don't know in 15 years what we're going to be using as a textile, but I don't think it's going to look like the rope we're using. The materials and the processes, again, are evolving so fast that it'll be interesting. But I don't have a crystal ball.
Yeah, you already see web being used in bailout systems and so on.
Yeah, that webbing, hollow braid Technora, which looks nothing like what we use normally. It all has pluses and minuses. Is the great Wayne says, there's everything has a plus and a minus. Beer is good, makes you fat. We can't have the best of all worlds at the same time. But the change is going to happen. The biggest mistake we can do is resist that change and think we're at the end of the cycle.
Yeah, what is I can't remember who initially said it, but yeah, the only constant is change.
Yeah. So. I think that the biggest challenge with change in an organization like ours or in a response agency is how you manage that change and when do you decide to make the change. And I think that's another part of our job on the contract side that happens, which is here's a great new idea. Frequently the cost barrier is not financial on the outlay for the equipment. Is it the right idea? And is it worth the investment to make the change? The training time, the time it takes to move people in a large agency from one concept to another while maintaining competence. And you can't absorb every change. You can't adopt every change.
Right. Yeah, change just for the sake of change is foolish, but change for the sake of advancing, the safety or the efficiency of the organization is good. And I think a lot of times people forget and they don't look at the true cost, whether it be, a career team, volunteer team, or whatever. But a lot of times the highest cost, if you will, of both time and money, or monetary values are the time it takes to either maintain proficiency in an outdated technique, or the reduced amount of time it takes to attain and maintain proficiency in a new technique with new equipment.
Yeah, I mean it's just another tool in the toolbox, right? We ran into this on the mountain rescue team I was on in Bend. That new ideas would come up and they were valid, but we would have to sit down and we did everything by task book. Right? We knew what our training was. Our training was laid out a year in advance. We knew what training served what objectives in the book to keep people competent. And if we wanted to add something, we didn't have the time to do more. We had to decide what to take out. And it was a very disciplined way to manage change. And I remember we did it. We went from brake racks to MPDs, and that was a long discussion about what skills have to change. and how long will it take us to get everyone proficient? And then how long do we have to actually deploy or be competent in two systems while we make the transition?
Right.
It's not easy. You can't just throw new gear in the bag and say we did it.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. People need to be proficient, with any technique or equipment that you have. Well, good. Well, hey, thanks for joining me here on the podcast, and hopefully our students and our listeners got to know you a little bit better, which I don't know, maybe a good or a bad
Yeah, I don't
thing.
know. I don't know if they got inside this head, if that was a positive or a negative, but they're there.
Yeah. But I know our time is running out. Craig has a hot water heater to install. So
very funny.
So I'd like to thank our listeners for tuning in again, and stay tuned for another CMC podcast.